There is a revolt going on within the Republican Party against Donald Trump. No, the party hasn't officially said we no longer support the guy that we just officially nominated at the Republican National Convention 2 weeks ago. That hasn't happened. But we have a growing list of current and former Republican elected officials that are saying, no, I am not going to vote for Donald Trump. This now includes Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins. She says she's not going to support Donald Trump. Basically, three issues for Susan Collins that did it for her. Number one, the quote denigrating comments that Donald Trump made about Senator John McCain, as well as Fox News host Megyn Kelly. Number two, Senator Collins is increasingly dismayed by Donald Trump's quote constant stream of cruel comments and his inability to admit error or apologize. And number three, she was especially disappointed about Donald Trump's attacks being directed at people who, quote, could not respond on an equal footing, either because they do not share his power or stature or because professional responsibility precluded them from engaging at such a level. This also is a reference to the entire controversy over Gold Star parent Khazar Khan talking about initially the controversy starting over his son, deceased U.S. Army Captain Humayun Khan. We talked about that extensively last week. Now, it's not just Susan Collins. 50 of the country's most senior Republican national security officials, many of whom worked for George W. Bush, not exactly a kind of a progressive Republican by any means, have signed a letter that says Donald Trump lacks the character, values, and experience to be president. He would put at risk our country's national security and well-being and would be the most reckless president in American history. Sounds like what a Democrat would write, Lewis, but this is actually 50 national security Republican officials who say, yeah, this guy is a danger.
To me, maybe the most shocking thing is that the character values of Mitt Romney and George Bush are supported by all of these national security individuals.
Right.
But they are right. How could you possibly have someone like Donald Trump with his finger on the nuke button?
It's also important to mention that this is not just a letter saying they won't support Trump. It is a letter saying they are going to be, it's not a Paul Ryan type statement saying we aren't endorsing the candidate. It is saying we are not going to vote for the guy. And that's increasingly become an area of division among some Republicans. And then lastly, just to sort of flesh this entire thing out, former Michigan governor, a Republican, William Milliken, has now said he is going to be not only not voting for Donald Trump, but voting for Hillary Clinton. There's this really interesting situation where when we say this every time, the Hillary haters say, well, David, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump. This is because Hillary Clinton is the safe, neoliberal, war hawk establishment corporatist. So why wouldn't Republicans vote for her? I don't really think that's the case by and large. I think this is mostly about Trump and his policies. It actually doesn't matter. We don't even really need to argue because whether you think Republicans are going to not vote Trump and or vote for Hillary because Trump is a disaster or because Hillary is sort of neoconservative and a war hawk, they're saying this, they're doing this is bad for the Republican Party. And that's what I think the focus needs to be, Lewis. Yeah, you can say the Republicans are voting for Hillary because she's actually basically a moderate Republican or a moderate Democrat or whatever. It actually doesn't matter. When you have this number of former and current Republicans saying we're voting for the Democrat over the Republican, that is chaos in the Republican Party. And that's what's going to impact the party well beyond November 8th.
It will, but many of them are still saying we're not voting for Trump while not saying we are going to vote for Hillary instead. And I know, like we discussed, many of them are up for re-election, and you don't want to drop that bomb.
The national security officials, the former Republicans, though, they're not posturing here for their personal re-elections. You have crossed the line when, as a current or former Republican, you say, I am publicly telling you I'm voting for the Democrat. Aside from whatever the specific policy issues may be to that individual, you're doing long-term damage to the Republican Party, and we'll continue talking about it.